Let us understand how to build queries to get the data from the table. We'll be exploring several scenarios to understand different aspects of building the queries and running the queries to get the data from the table using different criteria. When it comes to querying data from the table, we should leverage database capacity to filter as much data as possible within the database itself. We should not be fetching the data into application layer and then filtering the data in application layer. It is not a good practice at all. You will not be able to build scalable applications using that approach. You should always filter as much as you can using the database itself, because databases are typically a lot more powerful than your application servers. To follow the above pattern, one need to have decent skills related to databases and SQL. Feel free to master SQL using PostgreSQL as target database using this course or this playlist. Available for free. You should be able to learn for free. We should avoid hard coding while filtering the data. Rather, we have to use variables and placeholders in place of hard coding the values while filtering the data. We will get into those details as we proceed further. After creating the users table earlier, we have inserted data into the table. We have updated as well as we have deleted. As of now, it might have 2 records, which might not be good enough to explore several scenarios related to querying data from table. For that reason, I am resetting users table to have all the 6 records. This will take care of dropping and recreating the table. This will take care of inserting 6 records into the table. Now I am actually running this Python notebook to actually get SMS_connection object, using which we will be exploring querying the data from the table. In this case, I am creating cursor object by name cursor by invoking cursor on top of SMS_connection. The query says select star from users limit 5. It will fetch first 5 records from the table. This will take care of executing the query, and you should be able to iterate through results like this. And finally, you can close the connection. It will take care of iterating through all the 5 records that are fetched from the database. So we have fetched 5 records from the database table, and we have iterated through using this for loop to get the results. Now, here is how we can filter data based upon user ID. As user ID is primary key in the table, we typically use cursor.fetch1 to fetch the one record as object. As user ID is primary key, whenever we use equal condition and pass a user ID to it, it will always get only one record. There is no point in iterating through one record rather than using fetch all to fetch all the objects from the cursor, or rather than iterating through the cursor itself, it's better to use fetch1 to get the only record into an object, and then we should be able to process it further. Let me recreate the SMS connection object again by running this Python notebook, and this is how it will look like when we try to fetch one record using primary key from the table. So we have select star from users where user ID equal to %yes. As we are using placeholder, when we invoke execute with query, we are also passing the tuple with user ID. It will take care of getting one record for the user ID 1 into the cursor. And using fetch1, we can actually assign it to variable called as user. You can check the type of this user. It is nothing but of type tuple. You can also print by saying print of user like this. You can see all the attributes related to the user object here. Because it's a record from the table, all the attributes from the table is there as part of this Python object called as user. It is of type tuple. You can get the column names using the cursor after executing the query. Description will give all the columns as well as the data types. You can see the details here. So as of now, this user, which is nothing but straight select star from users from the users table in the database. Whatever columns we have on top of users, you can see those column names as well as the data types. If the query involves a join, if we fetch data from multiple tables, then the cursor will be pointing to attributes related to multiple tables as well. So cursors might not be one-to-one mapping with respect to the tables. It can be one-to-many based upon the nature of the query which you are developing. If it is a join query, then the cursor will have attributes from multiple tables as well. It all depends upon the object which is returned rather than the table itself. That being said, now we can actually develop a function called as get user details, which takes the connection object as well as the user ID as parameters. It will return the user object if the condition satisfies. So let's create this function called as get user details, and then we can say user equal to get user details like this. We can pass the SMS connection object along with the user ID like this. We can actually run this, and it will take care of querying the record from the table for user ID 1. You should be able to see the results here. So in this case, it is taking some time. Now you can see the results. You can check the type of the user. It is of type tuple. You can get the details for user ID 2 as well. And you can see the results here. Let me close this connection. Now let's see an example where the function will return Dict type object. Earlier we have seen the scenario where the function returns tuple like object Now we are talking about Dict type object. There are some advantages with respect to Dict type object. You should be able to access the attribute values in the form of the object name. In square brackets, you can specify the column name. Let's get into the details, then you will understand. So in this case, I am recreating the connection object by running this. The connection object name is SMS_connection. If you wanted to return a Dict object rather than tuple, you have to import Dict cursor from psychobj2.extras. It has to be imported, and then you have to create cursor by passing cursor factory equal to Dict cursor. The default is tuple. We are trying to override it to use Dict cursor to actually return the objects as Dict. So in this case, rest of the stuff is same. The function name is get user details. We are passing connection object as well as the user ID. Then connection.cursor with cursor factory equal to Dict cursor. The query says select star from users where user ID equal to %yes. Cursor.execute query user ID in the form of a tuple, and then cursor.fetch1, which will actually return the user object of type Dict rather than of type tuple. Let's run this and then run this. You can see the output here. It is within the square brackets, you can see. However, if you say type of user, it is of type psychobj2 extras Dict row. As it is of type Dict, using the object name, which is nothing but user, and then the attribute name, you should be able to access the values for that attribute of that object. So this will give us 1. This will give us the corresponding email ID of the user. Let's close the connection by running this, and then let's see an example of a query which returns multiple records. We need to use fetch all or fetch many to return the records as list of tuples or objects. Let's run this so that we have SMS_connection object. Let's create the cursor. In this case, I am using query where user password is not null. It will return multiple records. This is one of the common way when we try to get the data comparing with nulls. Now I can say cursor.execute of query where we are passing a hard-coded query. It will actually create a cursor for us which will be pointing to multiple records. If you want to get all the records, then we can use fetch all like this and assign it to a variable called as users. Let's run this and then run this to get the type of this variable or object. Users is of type list. You should be able to iterate through users by running this, and you can see the output. If you want to see the type of individual objects, you can actually say type of users of 0. You can see each of these objects are of type tuples. This is how you should be able to use fetch all to get all the records from the cursor into a Python collection to process further. And then you can close the connection. If you want to get list of dicts, you just have to overwrite this part. So you have to import psychobj2 extras Dict cursor like this. Let me add a new cell here. Let me paste it. Let's import this. Once it is imported, then you can actually create the cursor by saying cursor equal to SMS_connection.cursor. And then you have to say cursor factory equal to Dict cursor. So we can copy this part. Once it is copied, we can run this, and then we should be able to run the query by saying cursor.execute of query. Let's run this. It will actually give us the results in the form of a cursor. Now you can actually run this by saying users equal to cursor.fetchAll. You can check the type of this users. It should be of type list. You should be able to iterate through by running this piece of code. You should be able to see the results. You can see the results are in square brackets. Each record is in square brackets. To get the type of one of these records, you can say type of users of 0 or users of 1 like this, and you can actually check it. It is of type Dict row, which means you should be able to access using the column names. Now I can say users of 0 of user email ID to get the email ID. So this is how you should be able to return a list of dicts in case if you want to process the data in the form of dicts rather than in the form of tuples. So these are some of the common patterns using which we want to get the data from the underlying tables. Make sure you explore all these options and be comfortable with these. We have functions such as fetch1 when we try to get individual objects with equal condition on top of primary key. And also we have functions such as fetch all or fetch many to fetch a bunch of objects if the query returns multiple multiple records. Also, we can either return the objects in the form of tuples or in the form of dicts. If it is fetch all, it is typically list of tuples or list of dicts, versus with fetch one, it will be either a tuple or a dict. So you should be comfortable with all these nuances with respect to database programming in the pursuit of reading data from the table. This takes care of all the CRUD operations against the tables. Now you should be able to leverage this knowledge and build more as per your business requirements.